Welcome to the Gazette's Iowa Ideas In-Depth Higher Education Week. I'm Vanessa Miller. I've been a reporter with the Gazette since 2011. I've been covering higher education since 2013. And we're just going to start today's session by thanking our sponsor, Kirkwood Community College, and play just a short video from them right now. Yes, here we go.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lori Sundberg. I'm president of Kirkwood Community College, and I'd like to welcome you to the Iowa Ideas In-Depth Look at Higher Education this week. Kirkwood is proud to be a sponsor of this event. Kirkwood has been serving this region for 50 years, and I know that we're going to be serving for 50 more years. So as you think about your higher education needs, or even continuing education needs, I hope that you'll think of Kirkwood. Again, welcome to the event, and I hope you enjoy the presentations.
Awesome. Just to get started, I want to say how excited I am actually for today's discussion because we're going to go beneath all of the policy and practice talk and all of the administrative preparations and precautions just to find out what life in higher education has actually felt like this year for students. What has it been like? What's it like to balance a bunch of classes on the same screen or in the same space? What's it been like actually going to class, but having, your face covered and distance from peers? What about having to avoid things that have become so common in terms of, cramming in libraries or hanging out in dorm rooms? So anyway, I'm just going to give some brief discussions of our panelists today and then sort of dive into questions. But I want everybody who's participating can feel free to send questions as they come to you, because I'm going to save some time at the end to ask those. So if you have a question, just put it in the chat and we'll get to it eventually because I know I have a lot. So first, we're just going to start. So Elle Boeding, she's president of the University of Northern Iowa Student Government. She's a senior studying political communication, and she has minors in women and gender studies and politics and law. She's from Monticello, and through her student government work, she serves as a liaison between UNI administrators and students. She's been really focused this year on preserving the student experience despite COVID, so I'm sure she's going to have a lot of great insights on this topic. We also have Mara Smith. She's vice president of the University of Iowa Undergraduate Student Government. She's a fourth-year student studying therapeutic recreation and education studies and human relations, and she's getting a certificate in disability studies. She's originally from West Des Moines. And then we have Dr. Gwen Schimek-Tischler. She's associate vice president for student affairs and dean of students at Cornell College in Mount Vernon. We're obviously so thankful to have her here today because she's been at Cornell for a decade and is responsible for helping students navigate campus policies while also overseeing staff in 10 campus offices like resident life, student life, intercultural life, all huge points of interest right now. She also serves as the college's Title IX coordinator. So very relevant, and we're very excited to have everybody here today. I just wanted to start, if we can, by asking the students to share a little bit about what their experience was like last spring. So what was that? How did that play out for you going on spring break? Were you watching the news? How did that happen?
I can go first. I think it was very confusing. Connor's the president of Iowa Student Government. Our campaign was supposed to start that week after spring break when they added that second week of spring break, and we were just kind of confused about what was going on. And I think that generally describes how all of last semester went, or I guess 2 semesters ago, last spring, because nobody really had any idea what was going on. It was kind of like go with the flow, do what you can. I was trying to keep up with the news mostly because there were a lot of students who were really like scared and like what's going on. And it was, once we got elected, it was kind of our job to put that messaging out to students like, hey, everything's going to be okay. But even though we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And so it was hard because we were supposed to be like, hey, everything's going to be fine. But also we were like, I don't know what's going on.
Maybe.
Yeah. That's the best way I could describe our first few weeks, I guess.
Yeah, so I was actually a resident assistant this past year, and I had agreed to do spring break on call just to make some extra money. And so we hold like a, an old flip phone. And so I was the one who was like fielding all the calls from like parents and students and stuff like that. When they, were calling the on-call phone saying like, are we leaving campus? And I'd be like, I don't know. And so that was really stressful. And then having to like pack up my own stuff and leave and say goodbye to the residence hall that I'd lived in for the past 3 years of my college experience. And yeah, very similarly to Mara, we were elected a few weeks before the COVID, like we were kicked off campus because of COVID. And so, we were just really kind of in the midst of transition and being able to learn the ins and outs of this job without being able to be in meetings and things like that was incredibly stressful, all while trying to manage classes in the background. I think it was just so overwhelming. And I just remember not really knowing which way is up. And there was just I think a week or two where I don't know if I really did anything. I think after coming home, I was sort of like, okay, this will be fine. But then doing homework in a space that's not where I would normally do my homework, not having like coffee shops to go study at and like that kind of thing was such a huge transition for me. And then also I became president on April 15th. So I, was managing the first couple of weeks of us being off campus while in transition and not actually the president yet. And so that made things all the more complicated because I didn't really have any power to do anything.
Right, totally. And then Gwen, I mean, was it total chaos on your end? I mean, did you have like students emailing you asking for all these details and help trying to transition back home and make the technology work? What was that like?
Yeah, so on a personal note, I was away from campus during spring break. I got married at the very end of it, thinking that that was going to be the right time to schedule that to happen. And clearly that was not good timing on my part. But as we were making decisions that week, we extended our spring break by a week, like many of the other campuses around us. And I think really thought as the country kind of did, that this was going to be a 2-week delay and things were going to be fine and everything was going to maybe not return to normal, but people would be able to come back to campus. And a year later, we know that that certainly isn't the case. Everything during this whole time, but especially in those first few weeks, everything has just felt so dynamic in terms of when I look backwards, sometimes the weeks all blend together or the days all blend together. And yet it's hard to predict what the next 24 hours are going to bring. And it was especially that way during those first couple of weeks. So we were lucky to be able to extend spring break by a week, and we the block plan at Cornell kind of makes a difference there for us because students are only juggling one class, and so to say we're going to delay those classes by the start of them by a week, we weren't in the middle of a block or anything like that, so that kind of helped with some things. We were trying to maneuver if there were some classes that have some really intense in-person components, can we have those students on campus, but not anybody else? And trying to navigate all of those pieces, while also making sure that students who might not have housing or might have other reasons that they need to be on campus had access to that. And so in some ways it was really similar to our response to the derecho when that came through in August, but it was prep work for that.
Yeah. Well, and Elle, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but what was it like sort of academically making that transition, aside from like all of the social and like world issues that you're facing? Were you able to continue your coursework well or not?
I would say well is a stretch. It got done, but like it certainly wasn't anything that like enhanced my college experience. Honestly, if you would ask me the things that I learned out of spring semester last year, there's not much I can honestly recall. A lot of it felt like, work just to get points. So, discussion boards and responding to 2 people and those kinds of things that nobody really loves or learns a ton from necessarily. And so that was I think the hardest part. Also being like in the political science department, our classes are so discussion based and so engaging, and our faculty members do such a nice job of that. But that transition to Zoom and, the option to have your camera off and to, not necessarily engage and not have that sort of awkward silence that you have in a classroom that sort of pushes people to contribute, I think was one of the hardest pieces, and not being able to learn from my classmates in that as well. I really struggled with that.
Yeah.
On the staff side, our meetings were very similar when we went to Zoom. The usual, like, I'm making eye contact, so you know that I'm going to hop in next, wasn't quite there. And do we raise our hands? Do we not raise our hands? I think we were experiencing that and trying to engage students in making sure that we're getting the information we need from them, as well, in order to be able to help move them forward and get those pieces. Is moving to pass fail the right option? Is doing things solely online so that you're reading and doing the discussion boards? Is that the right thing to do? Or should we try to do a Zoom? All of those questions that we just weren't practiced in, I think we were trying to maneuver in that spring semester last year.
Yeah, and jumping ahead, sorry, Mar, go ahead. You go ahead first, and then I'll ask.
I was just going to add that both of my majors are very experiential based. So like I was in 2 classes last year that had an experiential component where we were supposed to go into classrooms or go visit different like inpatient services, and we didn't get to do that. And they had to completely restructure these classes that they've been doing for years the same way to be online. And it was really difficult to do those classes online because the whole point of the class is that you get this in-person experience, and nobody had ever had to do that online before. And so that was really hard. I've also always hated online classes. So it was a very hard transition for me. I mean, last semester I had 1 in-person class and it should have just been online. And this semester, all of my classes are online, and I'm very excited to be a 4th year student. I'm almost done.
Yeah, I mean, so while we're there, I just want to ask, like, what is the experience like with Zoom right now? Like, I'm so curious, like, do you have, when you're on class with all your classmates, is it the majority that have dark screens, or do you have a bunch of people who are interacting? Does your teacher just like speak into the void, or what's it like?
It definitely depends on the professor. Some of my professors are in the mindset of like, I know that you don't want to be here as much as I don't want to be here teaching on Zoom. So if you want to come with your screen off, that's fine. I have teachers who, if there's a guest speaker, you have to have your camera on and be engaged. It all really depends. And also I have some classes that are just like the teacher posts videos and that we don't even get on Zoom. So it really is a wide range.
Yeah.
UNI has been a little bit different just because we have more classes in person. So currently I have 2 classes that are completely in person, and then 2 that are hybrid, and then 1 that's completely online. So hybrid meaning we meet once a week and then the rest of the information is online. So that's been a little bit interesting because the days that we're in class, some people will still log on through Zoom. And so that kind of makes the discussion a little bit fractured because there's some people online and some people in person. And so, wanting to engage everyone, and our faculty members do a really good job of trying and asking, but sometimes, it just does not land very well. I think that it kind of depends on the faculty member and the way in which they go about engaging students too. I have some faculty members who ask questions at the top of every class, or one of my faculty members, it's a women, crime, and society class, super cool. And she lets us pick out a song to play at the beginning of class by like a woman or femme artist. And so she does a lot of fun things like that to really engage the class. But I mean, to a certain extent, there's only so much you can do because sitting on Zoom for an hour is exhausting, and it doesn't make sense really why it's so exhausting. But just being here and having to like make sure that there's not things going on around you, and your roommates aren't like yelling in the background or something like that is really tiring. And so I totally validate students who choose to sit there with their cameras off, and a lot of our faculty members have even said that, like, I know this is tiring, so if you need to take a break, take a break.
Yeah, Mara, you had mentioned that you had 1 in-person class and said it probably should have been online. What did you mean by that? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Well, in a year where all of my classes were already online, this particular class, there was no really need for discussion. It was just a lecture, There was no like studio involvement in it. There was no experiential learning involved in it. It was just, you go and you watch a teacher do a PowerPoint. And especially in the fall when everything was so rocky with COVID and nobody had been vaccinated yet, I was very much in support of all of our classes being online, especially except like dance classes, art classes, things like that needed to be in person. I was very much supportive of, if it can be online, it should be online. And this class in particular, especially because it was my only class I had to go to campus for, that probably could have also contributed to the fact that I didn't want to be there. It was definitely one that could have it was hard because I was like, I was very stubborn about it, about risking my life to get COVID, to go to this class where I had to be there to get my points. It was very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and for all three of you, I'm just wondering what's like the broad sentiment that you get from your peers or from the students on the campuses about whether they in the fall and now, whether they wanted to be in person or whether they wanted to be online, or what they felt was best. What's kind of the feeling?
Nope. Okay. There's such a wide range of feelings about it. And that's something we struggled with over the summer when we were talking to our advisors and different administrators about what we were going to do. Because for every one person that is super against going in person or being on campus at all, there's another person who is in full support of full in-person, no mask classes. And so to find the balance is absolutely impossible. Mm-hmm. It was just so frustrating because we would get these crazy worded emails from students being like, if you don't let me go to class, you're ruining my whole college experience and I'm going to be so mad at you for the rest of my life. And then we'd also get emails from people that are like, if you make me go to class, I'm going to die. And it was such a crazy experience because one, Connor and I didn't have any control over literally anything that was going on, but we had to field all of these questions and get all these responses from people. So it was every opinion that there could have been about it, we got.
I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, it's just you're like a small segment of the broader society and how leaders everywhere are having to deal with this. So it's very challenging. Ellie, I know, like you said, UNI is a little different. It has more in-person classes. Have people been happy with that, or do you feel like there's been concern, or what's the feeling up there?
It's really been a mixed bag. I think last semester more students were just more shocked that we didn't have that we had so many classes in person. I mean, I was a part of that community that was shocked. Everybody sort of, the first 3 weeks we were making bets as to when we were going to have to go back online. And I know that Mara probably had a very similar experience. Even the faculty and staff had kind of the same attitude towards it. We had some, this semester specifically, after our students have, kind of had that experience of a more safe in-person learning experience, I don't think we would ever be able to go back completely online. I think a lot of our students, especially those who have kind of those experiential learning components, education is huge at UNI. And so for students who have student teaching or level 3 field experience and things like that, the thought of them having to move that experience back online, I don't feel would go over well. And also I think students are really craving that in-person experience. A lot of our students, especially within student government, we've had this conversation quite a bit about, I pay for in-person classes. I signed up for in-person classes. If I wanted to have gone to college online, I would have done it. And so that's the way a lot of our students are feeling. But there's also certainly a large group of students who are concerned about safety or maybe, have a pre-existing condition. And so being online is the safest option for them. And I think UNI has done a really good job in responding to meet the unique needs of our students. But a big piece of being a student at UNI is that personalized experience, which is really hard to have online.
Right. And at Cornell, Gwen, you guys have kept numbers really pretty low in terms of infections. But is that, I mean, I know there's a hybrid experience there too, but do you know, is Cornell majority or not, or a good split in terms of in-person versus online?
Yeah, so we have between 80 and 85% of our students who are living here on campus, and a number of our classes that are kind of reflect that as well. So we have a few faculty who are in high risk situations or who have reasons to teach online primarily. But most classes that can meet in person have been doing that, minus when we've had these small spikes on campus of the spread. I would say our students are equally as apprehensive as both Mara and Elle have spoken to. So we have folks who are really wanting to be in person all of the time, and folks who have said, nope, I'm not coming to campus. I'm not doing that. And we've had a few students who've taken a step away for the year and are starting to plan to be back on campus for the fall, but who said, online isn't going to work for me and I don't feel safe being on campus right now. So I'm going to take a little pause in my education and come back. And we've been working with each of those students as well to return to campus when they're ready and able to do so.
Yeah. Ellie and Mara, have you seen that among your friends and peers? Like, have you seen people who either took the whole year off or came in fall and just bailed and were like, nope, I'm going to come back later?
We saw that a lot, especially in the incoming, like the freshman class of students coming from high school who are just like, I'll just wait. I'll take a year off. And I think that if I was in that situation, I probably would have done the same thing. I'm not sure what our numbers looked like for students who took like gap years who were already on campus, but I know we had quite a few.
Yeah,
right.
We also had quite a few. Especially in the incoming first year students, we had a lot of students who instead maybe chose to still live on campus, but then we're taking classes at Hawkeye instead, which is, pretty close being in Waterloo. And so we saw a lot of students move more towards like doing community college for a year and getting some of those credits done. And, like Mara said, I don't blame them. I probably would have done the exact same thing.
Right. I mean, you guys are both at the sort of end of your undergraduate degree terms. Are you happy about that? Like that you got these sort of freshman experiences, or are you sad that you're missing some of your more senior year experiences?
It's sad for sure. Connor and I talk about all the time, all the things we were looking forward to doing as president, vice president. Like we would get to go to DC and we would get to go to the bowl game and things like that, that we just didn't get to do because of COVID, which is really sad. But also I'm so glad to be done with online classes and just dealing with the unknowns of being in college during COVID. I know in the fall they're trying to go back to mostly in person, so it'll probably be more of a traditional college experience, but yeah, I'm pretty over it, I would say.
Yeah.
I feel really fortunate that I got a lot of those great experiences, like meeting friends in my residence hall my first year. That's the way that most people connect, especially in the first couple of weeks. And so I feel so fortunate, and some of those people are my friends to this day. And it just makes me so sad for our first year students who aren't having that experience, and also just makes me so worried for them and their level of success and how they're going to be able to integrate into our campus community. I am also pretty over it. It's just been really hard to both be in this position, and I know Mara has had a stressful year too. It's been a hard year to be in this position and not be able to make everyone happy, but then also trying to balance your own feelings about the situation on top of lost experiences, like getting to have a real homecoming for our senior year, and getting to go to sporting events, and traveling to go to Board of Regents meetings, and going down to the Capitol to meet with legislators. Like that's the stuff that I miss so much, that we got to do last year and haven't been able to do this year. I'm looking forward to seeing the way that our university is able to hopefully welcome students back to an open campus, because there's going to be multiple generations of students here at UNI that are going to need that. It's not just going to be the students that are going to be first years in the fall. It's going to be transfer students. It's going to be the students who are first years last year. We have a whole group of folks who have never experienced a regular UNI, and so I'll be interested to see how they manage that.
Yeah, and jumping off of those comments and yours too, Mara, I guess I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about mental health and how that, like, what has that been like for students? What are some of the issues they're dealing with? And are they more so than what they were dealing with, obviously, before this happened?
I would say it's definitely something that has risen to the surface a lot more this year. I think just the isolation and being alone, not having like any interaction with anybody has definitely had a large impact and negative impact on a lot of students. I know our counseling services have done a lot of panels and listening sessions and group therapy, like just that are open to anybody. And especially with the things that happened over the summer, like that, like specific to different minority groups, they've had specific different groups for people. But I know that I spoke on a panel for specifically first year students about mental health, because that being a first year student is hard enough. And then having this situation on top of that, I can't imagine how hard that was. But I know that everybody's making the best effort they can. I know my professors have been really understanding. Like if you reach out and say like, hey, I'm just having a hard time, I need an extension. Like most of my professors have been super understanding, which has been super helpful. But that taking that step to reach out, I know is super hard. And so I know a lot of students have just not done it, and they just kind of take the fact that they're not going to do well in their classes, which is really sad. But yeah, no, it's definitely been a struggle for mental health.
Yeah. What about at UNI? Are kids dealing with just, is it the isolation? Is it the anxiety? I mean, what is it, the fear? Like how is it all manifesting?
I think it's a combination of all of that, plus that lack of that loss of a sense of control over what happens to you. I think that's what I've personally struggled with the most. And I know that a lot of students have really echoed that too, especially in the spring semester last year. I just felt so lost because I couldn't control anything that was really happening with my education. And, I had a lot of people that were saying like, well, you can't control your attitude. And it's like, no, I really can't. I am, it was very traumatic for a lot of our students, having such a loss of their stability and their structure and their sense of self, because the person that I was in my hometown is not the person I am here at UNI. And I have grown so much out of that. So to kind of be transported back into high school, Ellie, is not something I did well with at all. And to be living under a roof with my parents for the first time in 3 years was also really strange. And so I think that mental health has been probably the most prevalent concern out of everything that we've worked on this year. And so we've been working really hard with our counseling center. At midterms last semester, our counseling center numbers had doubled from where they're at the previous year. And so, making sure that we get those resources out to students, and then checking on students who are in quarantine or isolation was something that we really worked very hard on, just to make sure that they weren't completely alone during that tough time. Compiling mindfulness resources and things like that. We spent a lot of intentional time trying to reach out to students and get them connected either with organizations or with faculty members or with other student leaders. So they kind of had someone who could be their structure and their sense of support, and just help them out and listen to them and tell them that everything's going to be okay and that they're proud of them.
Yeah. What are you hearing at Cornell, Gwen, from students? Are there a lot seeking out counseling services?
Yeah, I think a lot are seeking out both on-campus and off-campus resources. So we're finding more and more students who are entering college with having a counselor that they've worked with in the past. And so they are maintaining that relationship. And as kind of counseling has become more available via Zoom and those ways that telecounseling or telehealth is happening, I think we're also seeing students are really excited about opportunities for little day brighteners, right? So it's the random hot chocolate that we have available that you walk by and grab that is helpful. I think there's some pieces about the universality of knowing that everybody else is in the same boat, that while mental health continues to be a struggle, we also know that we're not alone in this, and that there's that kind of comfort. Wish I could give my friends a hug, when they need it, and those sorts of things. So trying to figure out how can I do that in a COVID safe and COVID COVID appropriate way. But it's trying to find those little things that are those moments of encouragement and those moments of acknowledging that this is rotten for everybody, and trying to let go of some of those messages that were out there in the first part of the pandemic a year ago, where it was, look what so-and-so did in 40 days, we can do that too. And we can not do everything, and being okay with that, and kind of accepting that, whether it's, I don't have to strive for that A in every single class. It's okay to have a class where I'm just getting through it. And it's a little bit more about survival than thriving. And at the same time, knowing that as we continue to adjust and look forward to a life post-pandemic, how is it that we're resetting some of those norms and helping us to figure out what those ongoing support services are going to be. So we're kind of in the midst of the crisis right now, but we also know that the students who are going to be coming next year and in the years future likely have different mental health needs than the students who are on campus right now. And so how are we starting to anticipate what that might be and be ready to serve students in that way?
Yeah. Well, and Ellie and Mara, I doubt, as upperclassmen, I doubt you both are living maybe you are living in the residence halls, Ellie, because you mentioned you're an RA, no, but do you get a sense as to what that experience has been like this year? Just because I remember it as being such a paramount experience, especially for first year students, and jumping from room to room and convening at the end of the halls and all these things. Like how has that looked for them? Do you know?
Yeah, learning from my friends who are RAs currently, it's been so hard for them to connect with their residents because a lot of the programming that they've been doing is on Zoom, and students really don't want to sit in class on Zoom all day and then turn around for the thing that's supposed to be fun on Zoom. And so, a lot of the RAs have gotten really clever with like grab and go events and stuff like that. And our student leaders are phenomenal for their resilience during this time. I know that resilience is kind of a cliche word, but I can't imagine, supporting students in such an intimate way as an RA this year. And so I think that a lot of our students are really just missing that experience because you can only have an additional person for each person in the room. So if it's a 2-person room, there can only be 4 people in there. And so, that totally eliminates, like, my residents and I would do like bachelor nights where we would all pile into someone's room and, lay down the futon so there's places for everyone to sit. And so, not being able to leave your door open and like knock and say like, hey, I'm Ellie, it's nice to meet you, I live 3 doors down. I think that experience and that connection and learning people's names and having, putting together playlists and stuff like that to listen to in the showers, all of those weird residence hall experiences, a lot of them have been lost. And so it's been hard for first year students specifically to make those connections.
Yeah.
Sorry. I also used to be an RA, so I have a lot of friends who are still RAs right now. And one thing I've heard that has also made the connection hard is there's such a wide range of opinion on the pandemic in the residence halls. So there are students who live in the residence halls who are going to the bars every weekend, but there are also students who will not leave their rooms because they know that those students are also roaming the same halls that they are and using the same bathrooms that they are. So there's that extra piece of like, I can't build community in my residence hall because I know not everybody in my residence hall is being as safe as I am. So even if everybody was being as safe, it'd probably be a lot easier to build community because you could talk to your neighbors or make friends with people on other floors. But there's that extra layer of, I don't know who's being safe and who's not. And so that's another layer on top of all the things Ellie mentioned, that it's just been very difficult.
Yeah, I know. That was kind of what I was going to ask is like, how strict, even in terms of like the administration, like how in the RAs, like, are people like peeking in and being like 5 people, one's got to leave? Or is it kind of like, these are the rules, but it's still kind of more normal? I don't know, like how tightly are they following these things?
I think it depends on who the RA is, who's like on duty, who's walking the building. I know a lot of people I've talked to, when you're approaching those rooms who are breaking the rules or those people who aren't wearing their mask in the hallway, it's like, I don't want to get close to them. They're not wearing their mask. I don't want to talk to them. They're being dangerous, like things like that. And it's hard to keep track of, because they have systems in place where if somebody doesn't have their mask on, like you're supposed to report them. And then if they get enough tallies or whatever, they get consequences. But it's so hard to keep track of that if like it's not the same person who's catching them, or if one person catches them and they're like, I'm just gonna give you a warning, I'm not gonna write you up, because then it's like a continuing pattern of this person not getting the consequences they're supposed to get for not following the rules. So I would say it's probably not as strict as it should be, but also if I was the RA in that situation, which I'm grateful that I'm not an RA this year because I can't imagine how stressful it is. If I was the RA in that situation, I don't know how I would handle it. Probably would be really burnt out from having to walk through the hallways and tell people to put their mask on, or tell people they can only have one guest with them. Because like Elle said, like that's such a big part of building community, is just meeting people in the hallway and hanging out with your floor mates, that I can't imagine trying to police that.
Yeah.
Right.
The expectation is that RAs have become the COVID police, which is just absolutely ridiculous, especially considering, you know, one, they're students, two, they don't get paid amazing. And so expecting them to risk their lives for this job is a really hard line to walk. And, you know, to a certain extent, I recognize that like that's the commitment that they made. But one of my dear friends, her grandpa passed away from COVID. And so having to stop students in the hallway who are, you know, kind of sassing back when my friend will say like, hey, you need to put your mask on. And she says, and, you know, a student will say like, this is fake, or this isn't real, or this is stupid. And then, you know, kind of her response is, my grandpa passed away from COVID like 3 months ago. And so I just really need you to follow the rules, because our students are dealing with such layers of trauma that, you know, I don't think any of us even realize. And I mean, I am so fortunate that I haven't had anyone close to me pass away from COVID. And so, you know, for students to be continuing to be student leaders and to be students and also human beings, I think has been something that we've really struggled with, how to support them in all of these different layers. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like their humanity is really what matters the most. But it's easy for other people to put that pressure on them that your job is the most important thing, your classes are the most important thing. And if you're not doing absolutely amazing, then you're a failure. And I think a lot of students, myself included, have really struggled with finding that balance.
Totally. Can I ask, did either of you get the virus? No. Yeah. And I guess I asked that because I'm wondering what, if you had any friends who who did and had to go through that quarantine or isolation period, like what was that actually like to, I don't know if they were in residence halls or at home, but yeah, talk to me about that a little.
I live with 4 other people. We're all really close friends. And so over the summer, we had a few COVID scares because we were being careful, but probably not as careful as we should have been. Just like, oh yeah, we can hang out in the backyard with people. Like, that's fine. Only one of my roommates got COVID, and she got it while she was at home. So she just ended up staying home for 2 weeks. But we did have quite a few scares where we would go get tested and then just quarantine for a little bit. So it was kind of a roller coaster of emotions this summer, of just kind of going with, oh, so-and-so's boyfriend had COVID, and so we were exposed.
I know.
And sort of is just ongoing of here we go again sort of thing. But luckily only one out of 5 of the people that live in my house got COVID. So it was pretty good odds, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. What is that? What is it like when you have to like stay put, or not? I mean, obviously you didn't have to be isolated, but having to, you know, not be able to leave and feel like you're sort of stuck even more than you're already stuck.
It's scary. I think that we were, because at that point, I think none of us really had a full grasp on when any of this was going to end, or like if we did get COVID, if we were going to get really sick or have a lot of symptoms, or if it was just going to be like, I don't feel anything, but I have COVID and I just have to sit in my house for 2 weeks. So it's scary because they're so unknown. And so we couldn't really, and it's just kind of like a waiting game of you get your test and then you have to wait and just sit there and wait until you get your test results back. So it's really scary, I would say.
Yeah.
I live with 5 people, so it's a very similar experience. And we're all very close friends, and none of us have had COVID. But it has, we've had our share of COVID scares, or we've all gotten tested and things like that. Or we're seeing a lot of our students who will go in quarantine at home, which isn't an amazing alternative, but it's probably better for their mental health. So, they have people around them, so they're not in a residence hall by themselves. But, then they're taking COVID into someone else's community. And so that's, definitely a concern for us here at UNI, and kind of everywhere. For my personal experience, I am really fortunate that I haven't gotten it, and I'm very surprised in that. My roommates, my second job is I do direct support for people with disabilities, and one of my roommates works in a nursing home. And so we've really tried to do our best with that, keeping that in mind that even if it may not make me sick, it could definitely make someone that I'm around sick. And so I was really fortunate that I have a good group of friends, but the thought of, being stuck there for 2 weeks or whatever, though I love them to pieces, I don't think any of us would have done well with that. I surely didn't, there was at one point in the summer where I did not feel good, and I was, I ended up testing negative, but I that 6 days or whatever was really nerve-wracking and made me in a pretty bad place mentally, just because, the lack of freedom.
Right. Well, yeah, and Gwen, I don't know how many kids over on the Cornell campus were in isolation or quarantine, but I'm just curious, how does the administration help them? Do you guys offer food delivery and stuff like that?
Yeah, so students who are isolated, we saved one of our residence halls for them to be able to be in there, and we have kind of all of the things that you'd want. So we have the pulse oximeter so that we can check their oxygen levels each day. And we stocked the freezers in there so that they have extra meals whenever they need a little bit more sustenance than what they might be getting delivered. But then they get meal deliveries a couple times a day, and they can email in what they'd like to eat. So we try to make it really personalized, and it's delivered to anybody who's in quarantine as well. And we do mail delivery if they're needing that, or I think at one point this fall we were dropping off microscopes that people needed in order to do their classwork activity. Certainly that's for folks who are feeling up to doing their coursework. We've had a few students who have felt pretty unwell as well, so they haven't necessarily continued with their coursework. But for folks, we've had a lot of students who had pretty mild symptoms, and so we're just needing to quarantine or isolate because they were symptomatic, slightly symptomatic, or exposed, or carriers but not experiencing any problems with it. And so it's varied based on the student, but we try to do that. They get checked in on daily, or a few times a week if they're in quarantine, try to make sure that they're set up for what they need.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and so I guess I'm wondering, what has the spring semester been like? And has it been different from the fall, or what are you feeling right now?
It's just boring mostly. There's not really anything to do. It's just kind of, I think maybe this has to do with the fact that I'm in my last. So it's boring for me because I don't really go to the bars or anything, but it's also very frustrating because you get on social media and it's like, oh, so-and-so's in Florida, or so-and-so's at the bars again. That's a bummer. Yeah. I'm sitting at my house every weekend doing nothing. It's very frustrating and draining because if it's sort of like if everybody was behaving the correct way,
yeah,
fine, and this would have been over a long time ago. But yeah, it's frustrating, I would say.
Yeah, and how many classes do you have online right now or in person? What's the balance there?
I am in 6 classes and they are all online.
Gosh. Yeah, and what about you, Elle? Has it been about the same from fall to spring?
Yeah, our campus has done some really cool online events, to adapt and stuff like that. But like I said earlier, my desire to sit on Zoom for an event is so low, and I feel so bad because, there's awesome people who are doing really great things on campus, but I would rather go and, sit at home with my roommates and have that face-to-face interaction than to sit on Zoom and, do some sort of like sip and paint or something like that, which, I feel like probably is the wrong thing to say as a student body president, but I can't, sit in meetings on Zoom all day. And, I know Mara has a very similar experience too, where, we have back-to-back meetings and then we'll maybe sit on Zoom for class. And then, at the end of the day, that's the last thing that you want to do. And so I feel like I've had a lot more fun, spending time with my roommates and, doing my homework here in my office and stuff like that with other upper cabinet members also in their offices. So at least we can talk to one another than, going to something online.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to add, like, I've had very similar experience of like, I'm in meetings all day or I'm watching videos all day of lectures that are recorded. And the last thing I want to do is get online and watch a concert that someone's putting on that feels like I'm still just watching TV. So that's been really hard because, like Ellie said, like as a student leader on campus, I feel like I should be supporting these events, but it's so draining to put the energy into that when I could spend my time with my roommates or going on a walk or doing something that's going to give me energy. So that's been hard. But yeah, no, the only interaction I get is with my roommates or when I go to our student government office and I hang out with Connor. So that's what I do.
You and Connor are besties now.
We really are. He's one of the only people I see. So we have.
Yeah. Right. And are you both graduating this spring?
We are.
So my question, I guess, then is, how do you feel about this in-person option and that they're like, were you bummed before that was there? Are you going to go, or what are your thoughts?
I have very mixed emotions about it because I was definitely bummed, like, oh, I don't get to go to commencement and have that like traditional experience that everybody else has gotten to have. And last year, my best friend is a year older than me, so she graduated last year. And when that was all happening, they're like, oh, you'll have the option to walk in December or next May. And so we were really excited because it was like, oh, we could walk together. That's super cool. And now it's like, oh, well, I actually don't want to go to sit in Kinnick with me and my two parents and also everyone else that goes there and their parents who I don't know who anybody's doing. So it's a bummer because I wanted to have that traditional commencement experience, but also it's kind of scary and frightening that this is the option we have, because putting all of those people into one area sounds like a bad idea to me. So I don't even know if I'm going to go to in-person commencement.
Yeah.
So the option's there, but it's not necessarily the option that I wanted, I guess, is my answer.
Yeah. What about you, Ellie? Are you going to go?
Yeah, I am. So I speak at our commencement ceremonies. And so I sit on our commencement committee and have been advocating very heavily that whatever we can do to maximize the experience for our students, but also like really trim it down so we don't have as many people there in person as possible. So our provost has asked all of like the deans and heads of departments and things like that to stay home. So with me, one of our associate provosts, John Valentine, and President Nook as the platform party. So we can maximize the number of guests that students can have. And so, they'll sit in their little pods in the Unidome. And it's certainly going to be a different experience, and sort of the pomp and circumstance that we're used to is definitely not going to be there. I tried to explain that to students as they were petitioning and advocating for an in-person experience, that you can have an in-person experience, but the experience you're going to have is not really what you think it is. And so a lot of the more ceremonial part will be in our online ceremony, which I hope that people still take advantage of and, take that time to maybe celebrate with their family or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Have you gotten a lot of RSVPs, Gwen, at Cornell for the in-person for the in-person option?
I think so. I've been pretty hands-off with that experience so far, but it's been exciting to see it coming together. I think we're we're ready for rain or shine being out there, which will be different for us. We usually have a indoor location that won't be an option this year. And so we're also trying to do the class of 2020 commencement for those who would like to come back for an in-person commencement the day before. And I think we've had fewer folks wanting to come back for that with the way that we're still pretty restricted. But I think a lot of the members of the class of 2021 and their parents or their 2 invited guests, whoever that might be, are looking forward to being on campus if we can be.
Yeah. Well, great. Yeah, and we're sort of coming to the end of our time here, but I wanted to ask Elle and Mara, like the economy is so wild right now, and the job market and all of that. But what are you guys? Have you secured jobs or internships, or what does it look like for graduating seniors right now?
I think a lot of seniors are taking advantage of the fact that there's not a lot of push to jump right into getting a job right now, because a lot of people are just living at home right now with their parents. But also there's that scary element of like, if that's not an option for you, you have to kind of figure it out. I got an internship at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. So I'm moving. My internship starts the day after graduation. So I am moving very quickly, which is frightening. But
yeah.
I'm very excited about my internship and grateful that I got a job. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm sort of delaying the job market by a few years. I accepted at the Vanderbilt Peabody School of Education for their Masters of Public Policy in Ed Policy this past week. Oh gosh, that feels like forever ago. And so I'll be moving down to Nashville in the fall. And so I'll be here for the summer, probably just working and stuff like that. But, trying to even find jobs in the area to do, something full-time or to do an internship has been difficult just because a lot of, especially education related areas are not well funded right now. And so, knowing whether they're going to have the opportunity to pay a graduate assistant or to pay an intern is something that I've really struggled with because, there's a lot of great opportunities out there, but I unfortunately cannot afford to live if I don't get paid. And so that's definitely something that I've been struggling with. And I think a lot of other students are struggling with too. I think we have a lot of students that are, taking the grad school route or are maybe choosing to stick with the job that they've worked at here in Cedar Falls full time. So, whether it's you worked at a coffee shop until you can find something different, I think that that's something that a lot of our students are doing, which is definitely disheartening because UNI does a lot of really great things to set you up for success after graduation, global economic crisis pending. And so that's really the thing that I have been most worried about is, kind of the world that we will be stepping out into and what that will look like, especially for me as someone who wants to work in education. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, totally. And I have heard, like you say, that the grad school applications are up. I'm wondering, in shopping for grad schools or considering where you'll go, did you consider like their handling of COVID or their like offering of online versus in-person classes? Did you have to do some of that research?
Totally. Yeah. So I really was intentional about meeting with, representatives from each of the schools and kind of talking about the way that they've been managing it. And then also talking about the way that they're looking for the upcoming year, because the desire for me to spend thousands and thousands of dollars for an online experience was zero. And, so if that was a huge part of my consideration, because if it was going to be an online program, I would either say no to that program or maybe delay a year because I don't learn well online, kind of like we've talked about this entire time. And also, it's so much money for, an online experience whereas, in the field of ed policy, discussion is so huge and being able to meet with your peers is so huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so thankful for all of you guys participating today. Your insights were great, amazing. And I'm just really, again, so few of us have been able to be sort of on the ground where you are because of COVID and listening and seeing and watching. So hearing it firsthand has been really great. I'm just going to end by noting for everybody that there's another session immediately after this one that's going to take sort of a deep dive into that rush to move everything online and what that was like from an administrative standpoint or a teacher standpoint, and what the use of technology will sort of mean for higher ed, both in the immediate term and the long term. So that's coming up right at noon, and that will wrap our in-depth look at higher ed this week. So the Gazette's full annual Iowa Ideas Conference is October 14th and 15th, and it will be virtual and free again. It'll span a whole range of tracks, so including education, but also the environment, policy, healthcare, and you just have to register, which is open now at iowaideas.com. We have two keynote speakers for that main event. That's David Gould. He's a visiting professor at the University of Iowa's Public Policy Center. And then also Peggy Whitson, who's a retired NASA astronaut, and she's a current collaborator with SpaceX. So anyway, should be fun. And thank you guys all so much again for being here today. I'm really thankful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.